Welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Bill Koski. I direct the Youth and Education Law Project, which is listed as the Education Advocacy Clinic. And as Juliet mentioned, my partner in crime and the person who is my clinical staff attorney right now is Tara Ford. She is an SLS grad from a while ago, and she founded the legendary Pegasus Legal Services in New Mexico. So I'm very lucky to have her, and hopefully you'll get a chance to meet her along the way. So we've been asked to talk about who our clients are and what students do in our clinic. So I'm going to give you an example of 3 different clients from the past 2 quarters. First of all, we represented a 15-year-old boy who was arrested at school for being in a fight, and he is currently incarcerated in juvenile hall, and he is not receiving the educational services and mental health services that he's entitled to. That's client number 1. Client number 2 is we're representing a 5th grader who has Down syndrome, and he's currently segregated in a self-contained classroom for other kids with severe disabilities. But he and his family want him to be educated with his non-disabled peers in a typical classroom. And client number 3 is a mid-sized Central Valley school district which has a large population of low-income, immigrant, English learner children who wants to improve, the school district wants to improve its community engagement practices so that the community has more of a voice in budgeting, curricular planning, and that sort of thing. Those are 3 clients that we have. So what do students do with each of those clients? Well, with regard to that 15-year-old who's incarcerated, we've appeared in front of the juvenile court judge to try to persuade her that the lack of educational services that he's currently receiving should mitigate his current sentence in juvenile hall, that he should be allowed to go back to his community. And hopefully we're going to prevail with that argument. With regard to the child who has Down syndrome, the 5th grader, this case actually came from last year, the students negotiated with opposing counsel a settlement agreement that not only got him into a regular typical classroom with supports and services, it also got him some compensatory services because he had been denied an appropriate education in the past. And then finally, with regard to that Central Valley School District, we worked with the superintendent, staff, and a parent steering committee to come up with a set of policies, practices, and procedures to do better community engagement and make sure that the community's voice is heard on an ongoing basis. So that's the kind of work we do. You'll notice there's some mix of advocacy, a little bit of counseling and consulting work, as we talked about before, and I hope you'll join us.
All right, okay. George Fisher, who's the client in the criminal prosecution clinic?
I will
hop on down.
That question. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, in the prosecution clinic, students learn to act morally with power. You learn to be effective, principled courtroom advocates. And you learn to think about, and more importantly, to act on the prosecutor's fundamental ethical duty to do justice. So our proudest moments in the prosecution clinic are not necessarily when we win our cases, but when we persuade the district attorney's office to drop the case. That's something that students do, and they do often. It's a myth and a wrong myth that young lawyers, even students, can't act on their own discretion and their own ethical principles when advocating in a prosecutor's office. You just have to learn how to form opinions and then stand up for those opinions and advocate those opinions. And you can prevail, as we do, as our students do, over and over again over the course of the year. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Debbie Sivas, the Environmental Law Clinic.
I'll be quick.
Snapshots.
We walk in the woods, yes. So I will do a very quick version of Bill's, which is just to give you a sense of clients, we are in this week and the starting of next week, we have 3 clients that our students are been heavily involved in. So yesterday, some of our students met with our clients who passed a local initiative in Monterey County, an anti-fracking initiative that so far the county is not really defending, and so we're representing those clients and defending that local initiative, local prerogative. We also met with a small progressive city that wants to close down a public nuisance. So that's a different kind of client. And then Monday and Tuesday of next week, we have we're all going up. Our entire clinic is going up to meet with the Pitt River Tribe, who we've been representing for about 20 years in a protection of a sacred site. Luckily, we've now finally won the case.
Woohoo!
We're going up to talk about that. So that's a range of the kind of clients we have.
And when you say we went up and met with, you mean the students sit down at the table and do the meeting?
Yes. So right.
Don't
So
sit and watch Debbie meet with the tribe.
Pitt River Tribe, we have students getting ready to go up there, and we're going to moot them, and they're going to do a great presentation to the tribe.
Oh, and yes, Isaac.
Isaac Chang, who's our newest clinical supervising attorney, and Alicia Thiesing, who's been here a long time now.
Thank you, Bill, for. Okay, Jeff. Supreme Court Litigation Clinic. Jeff Fisher, also teaching in that clinic. Pam Carlin, who's here, and David Goldberg, who's not. I just saw him rolling a suitcase around.
Right.
Had a conflict. So I'm one of the 3 instructors in the Supreme Court Clinic. As for our typical clients, I'll just say that about half of our work roughly is criminal, and half of it is civil. So a typical criminal client, I suppose, I could just use the most recent case that we had completed in a happy way on Monday. We represented a guy who claimed that his Sixth Amendment right to an impartial jury was violated because they found out after the trial that one of the jurors harbored and voted on the basis of anti-Hispanic bias. So we represent, that's just an example of the kinds of claims we would bring on behalf of somebody saying their criminal procedure rights, either at trial or maybe through the police investigation, had been violated. On the civil side, rather than to give you a particular example, I'll just say that it really runs a wide gamut. That's this kind of distinctive thing about our clinic, is that we, insofar as we have a subject matter, it's a little bit more the Supreme Court itself rather than any particular area of law. So on the civil side, we've done cases on behalf of plaintiffs pressing civil rights claims, consumer protection claims, employment, wage and hour claims, or discrimination claims. We even did a claim based on the tonnage clause in the Constitution, which even we hadn't heard about before it came to us, but I promise you it's in there. You can look it up later. So we do a wide range of variety of things, and that's part of the fun, we think. The other thing I'll just say quickly by way of our typical clients is either by way of the individual representation when we're getting up to speed on the law and the dynamics of the issue, or sometimes by way of amicus work, friend of the court brief work, we work with organizations and interest groups who might be experts in any particular area of law. So we might represent those kinds of groups either directly or work with them indirectly on our cases. In terms of the work you'll do in the clinic, the primary focus in our clinic is research and brief writing. We do briefs both at the stage where the court's deciding whether to hear a case, and then quite a few briefs as well where the court has already decided to hear a case, and now we're arguing for how the court ought to resolve it on behalf of our clients. So the lion's share of the work in our clinic is going to be research and writing, and then editing, and then editing again, and then meetings about further edits, and you get the idea. So we try to hone these long and fairly complex documents over the course of the quarter, and you'll get to work on a couple directly and several by the indirect workshopping method with your peers.
Thank you, Jeff. So next up is Jayashree Shrikantaya, who directs the Immigrants' Rights Clinic, and she works with Lisa Weissman-Ward, who also teaches in that clinic. So I'll turn it over to Jayashree.
Hi, everyone. The theme of the Immigrants' Rights Clinic right now is resistance, for obvious reasons. So come work with us. All students in the clinic get assigned to 2 things. The first is an individual removal defense case. This is a case representing someone who's in deportation proceedings in San Francisco Immigration Court. I'll give you one quick example of a client named Laura. That's not her real name. We represented her in immigration court in San Francisco. Students wrote the pleadings. They conducted a mini trial. We won some things. We lost some things. The case was appealed to the Board of Immigration Appeals. Students wrote the appellate brief. The case was appealed again because we lost. We appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Students wrote the appellate brief in the Ninth Circuit. They will argue the case in the Ninth Circuit. So that's just gives you the range. Every student also does an advocacy project, and that can be anything from impact litigation, where counsel in a case called Jennings versus Rodriguez in the Supreme Court this term, that students have worked on the litigation for 7 years, from the class action complaint filed in district court all the way to 3 Ninth Circuit appeals and now in the U.S. Supreme Court. And we do other kinds of advocacy work that is equally important, including, for example, know your rights materials for people who have ankle monitors, and advocating for less cooperation between local law enforcement and immigration and customs enforcement. So that's our clinic. Thank you for this chance.
So next up is the International Human Rights Clinic, which is directed by Professor Jim Cavallaro, who's not here because these people do a lot of traveling. So he's out of the building at the very least. So Diala Shamas, who teaches in that clinic with Jim, is going to tell you a little bit about it.
Hi, everyone. So Jim is halfway across the globe looking at issues of access to water in the occupied territories. To give you a bit of a sense of what our clinic does, we do travel a lot, but generally it's to further sort of human rights issues on a range of topics. And I guess we follow sort of two principles. One is to have creative engagement with international mechanisms, and two is to work on behalf of some of the most vulnerable populations. So as an example of some recent work that our clinic has done, students went to Australia to meet with individuals who were in the offshore detention centers in Nauru and Papua New Guinea, spoke to them about the conditions of detentions over there, and then worked on a communication to the International Criminal Court, articulating a basis for criminal liability, or theoretical basis for criminal liability for against Australian officials for their role in developing and implementing the detention conditions in those centers. Another example of a partner organization that we're working with is for a coalition or cooperative of refugees on the island of Lesbos in Greece, who are focusing on access to resources for torture survivors there.
Thank you. Phil Malone directs the Intellectual Property and Innovation Clinic, and Jeff Perlman teaches along with him.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. So typical client is really tough for us because we have a really wide range from organizations to individuals like technologists, law professors, activists, and so on. A couple of quick examples to try to give you a sense. So some of our students represented the American Foundation for the Blind and other disability rights advocates in a copyright office proceeding to try to make sure that certain copyright laws didn't restrict the ability of blind people to use assistive technologies, screen readers, and so on. I submitted detailed comments to the Copyright Office, then traveled back to Washington, D.C., and actually testified before the Copyright Office, sort of sat there next to a bunch of gray-haired, very experienced D.C. lawyers and made their arguments on behalf of their clients. We've also represented a group of filmmakers, including Brave New Films, and some national media critics in a brief to the Second Circuit, trying to protect their right to make fair use of Fox News video, news broadcasts, and other broadcasts for the purpose of criticism and political commentary. So a really wide range of clients and a very wide range of cases. Thanks.
Jim Sani directs the Religious Liberty Clinic with Zeba Huck.
Thank you. We do clinical work in that timeless and timely field of religious liberty. We do it in generally 3 areas: prisons, employment, and land use. To give you just a snapshot of the work that we do, this week on Monday we filed a brief in the Ninth Circuit in a prisoner religious accommodation case that will be argued by, was written by students and will be argued by students. Actually, the Ninth Circuit asked us to represent the client because of the reputation of our clinical program here. Another case that the students right now across the way are working feverishly to finish a summary judgment brief and preparing for oral argument in a few weeks.
I thought summary judgment was just like a rule you memorize in civil procedure. You mean you actually do something with that rule?
Yes, and so they're writing it and will be arguing the motion in a couple weeks. And based on depositions that were taken all last year, we had the students take all the depositions. So that's a Seventh-day Adventist employment accommodation case. Our client was refused employment because of her belief in observing the Sabbath on Saturday. And then the last item is another group of students is preparing for a board meeting for a Muslim community association to brief them on a variety of civil rights issues that that community is facing right now. So a lot of important work and a lot of opportunities for professional development and growth in the area.
Thank you. And back to Professor Tyler, who teaches the Criminal Defense Clinic with Suzanne Luban.
Yes, so Suzanne Luban co-teaches with me, and let's see, what can I tell you? So just to break it up, I'm going to come to this side now. First of all, our clinic, the Criminal Defense Clinic, you can think of as a public defender clinic. That's really what it is. The folks that we represent are accused of misdemeanor matters in the counties that surround Stanford, San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. The folks that we serve, that our students serve, are all different ages and ethnicities, often people of color, typically marginalized in one way or another, which is to say, perhaps they're on the margins because of poverty. That's often the case, of course. Or they're on the margins because of mental health issues, or they're on the margins because of substance abuse issues. But that's not all of our clients. Some of the people that we represent, actually, you would probably recognize, but we can't represent any of you. We don't want to. What are the things that student attorneys do for their clients in the Criminal Defense Clinic? It runs the gamut. First of all, counseling about their rights, about the legal proceedings, about the options that they might have to pursue. Our students investigate cases. I talked about the counties that surround Stanford, so those investigations could send students to the coast. In fact, one of the cases that we have this coming quarter will mean that students will probably be on the San Mateo County coast, which should be great. It might send them to rural areas. We had students who went to the rural reaches of Santa Clara County investigating a case, or it might send them into urban settings doing case investigation. They may be involved in negotiations. Of course, they'll be involved in negotiations with prosecutors. They will be writing and arguing motions in court. They will be cross-examining officers in evidentiary hearings, and they might also be briefing and arguing on appeal. We're in the middle of an appeal right now. So that's our snapshot.
Thank you. I'll take it. Okay, two more. Jay Mitchell directs the Organization and Transactions Clinic, in which he is joined by Michelle Sanu. Professor Mitchell.
Jeff, did you say tonnage clause?
Yeah, tonnage.
Tonnage. Okay.
It's almost as obscure as emoluments used to be. There's all kinds of stuff in there.
So O&T is the corporate practice group in our law firm. We don't do any litigation. All of our clients are corporate entities. They're all pretty well-established nonprofit organizations around Northern California, working in all sorts of different fields. So just a couple of examples. We've represented the KIP National Charter School Network since the inception of our clinic. We do a lot of work for the Ferry Plaza Farmers Markets and a lot of other big farmers markets in this part of the state. And increasingly, we're working with increasingly out there visual and performing arts organizations up in San Francisco. The work that we do for our clients, our students draft a lot of contracts. We write contracts and other legal documents. We advise clients about a variety of topics, including operating model design, risk assessment, intellectual property protection, corporate structure. And our students routinely appear in front of boards of directors advising about governance matters, merger planning, merger assessment, expansion into new geographies. It's very much of a corporate orientation. The idea is to prepare students for that type of a practice, both here in the Valley, New York, wherever they go, but also prepare you for pro bono and board service work when you're out in practice. So that's O&T.
And last but not least, the Community Law Clinic, not at all least. I direct the Community Law Clinic. This is the one out in East Palo Alto, in which I am joined by Danielle Jones and also Lisa Douglas, who's sitting right here. And Danielle, I'm not going to interview myself. Danielle, tell us a little bit about the Community Law Clinic's clients.
Indeed. Hello. I'm Danielle Jones. I direct our post-conviction relief practice at the Community Law Clinic in East Palo Alto. As Juliet mentioned, we're off-site. We're in the community in East Palo Alto. That's where our law office sits. Like all of the clinics, ours is quite a dynamic space. In addition to having all three of us, we practice in 3, sometimes 4 practice areas. Like I mentioned, criminal record expungement is the practice that I direct. We also work in housing and Social Security disability benefits. Ron sort of went through the list, I think, that applies to many of our clinics with respect to, I would say in all of our cases, there's client interviewing, there's client counseling, there's some form of formal motion drafting or brief writing, and certainly counseling our clients to develop a work plan and a case plan to figure out exactly what our clients' goals are and how we as their lawyers can help them effectuate those goals. Just to take a couple of snapshots, one is an expungement case, just maybe a typical expungement case that you might see in our office. Someone who wants to pursue a nursing license through the California State Licensing Board, but her conviction history is standing in her way. So that's where we come in. We help her clear up her record so that she has a clean slate when she applies to the state board to get her RN license. And all of the things I just mentioned about creating a work plan, a case plan, counseling, close counseling to figure out what our client wants to do and how we can make that happen. But to bring the lens even closer to the work, what I would say is that just this past week, in all of our practice areas, I think yesterday Juliet was in court with her students doing a motion for summary judgment on an eviction case. A couple days before that, one of my students was running around the office getting his final motion package together for an early termination of probation case and simultaneous expungement petition to the court in Alameda County. We're branching out to Alameda County on this one case. And students earlier this week successfully argued a Social Security disability case and got their client benefits. All of this in a span of maybe 48 hours, I don't know. Yeah. So it's an exciting time. It's wonderful to do clinics. All of us have unique things to offer, and that's what I'll say.
Thank you.